Webinar. Thank you very much. Let's start the proceedings. We are on time always, and I think it's a good idea to try and be on time. Um, so let me begin the proceedings. Okay. Okay, folks. Here we are. We are beginning a PID investment series. We decided that there's so little known about the problems in Pakistan that we will have a series of webinars on many subjects. So we held a series of webinars on human resource management. We're holding a series of webinars on growth and stabilization. We're also going to hold a series of webinars on investment because these are very important subjects. So, bit of housekeeping. Please keep your mics muted, otherwise the speakers get, a lot of random noise which disturbs them. Also disturbs our hearing. At the end of the speakers, let them speak first. Remember, we don't want to do what's done on TV, where they have just random noise, nobody can hear anything. So we want to make sure that we learn. This is a learning seminar. We're not fighting for TV ratings. So please raise your hands after the speakers have spoken, and I assure you, everybody will be allowed, given a chance to speak. There is no question about leaving anybody out. So you will have a chance. You will have a chance to say whatever you like. We do not hold back. We do not censor. If anybody wants to use the hashtag is there, PIDINV. So there we are. Now, let me welcome my panel. First of all, big thank you to Harun Sharif for suggesting and arranging this. So Harun Sharif is a member of our advisory board as well as senior fellow at PIDE. So we welcome all advice and help that we can get, because that's how we learn. Otherwise, nobody alone knows anything. So Harun Sharif, former Minister of State and Chairman of the Board of Investment, long career in Pakistan, including the SCCP, knows Pakistan very well. So it's always a pleasure to hear him. So welcome, Harun. Next is Mr. Almas Haider, another well-known personality of Pakistan, entrepreneur, chairman of SPL Group, which is a very well-known group of technology and auto parts, etc. And former president of Lahore Chamber of Commerce, but also I think now he's the chairman of the EDB. Is that right, Almas sir? Engineering Development Board? I think so, Almas.
That's one of the things I'm doing.
Also, thank you. I'm very grateful to Mr. Wang Hua, the Minister Counselor for the Embassy of China. We can always count on the Chinese people to help us. The Chinese ambassador had a very good session with us on COVID and many things. So China is always welcome in Pakistan. I don't have to say that. Everybody knows that. And we look to you, Mr. Hua, to give us some good advice on investment. Then we have Mr. Ishaq Barni, General Counsel at the Qatar Financial Center. Mr. Barni has been helping the Qataris. So now, Mr. Barni, we'd like you to help the Pakistanis. Tell us what we can do. Qatar is the right place. You just told us that Qatar is handling COVID technologically. So maybe you can tell us what we can do with investments too. So I have a very, very short presentation to set up the meeting. Thereafter, I'll take over to the guests. My first slide is what I showed yesterday. Last night, we had a session with Masood Ahmed, the current president of CGD, Center for Global Development, and the former director of the Middle East, on managing growth and stabilization. And I love to show this slide because it's a very important slide. This slide should keep every Pakistani awake. This slide should worry all our policymakers. Sadly, it doesn't. Sadly, I hate to say it doesn't. What does this slide show? It's long-run growth, and you can see the long-run growth trend is declining. Our growth is volatile, first of all. You can see how volatile it is. Secondly, it's declining. Next time, Mr. Hua, I'll also put in the Chinese growth rate, which is not volatile and which is increasing all the time. So that's very interesting. We pointed this out in the 2011 framework of economic growth. Sadly, people still don't understand this. Now, why is this happening? because we are continuously in the emergency ward. The IMF is the emergency ward. We have been in the emergency ward since the 1960s. I think the last program of China was somewhere in the 1980s. China has never gone back to the IMF. I think that's the first thing that we have to learn. If you can't avoid the IMF, you can't have investment, you can't grow. So that's an important point. Yesterday, the seminar came up with this. There were lots of good people. Shaukat Tareen was there too, the former Minister of Finance. And everybody agreed that our biggest problem is we go back to the fund because we have no thoughtful policy. We have no clarity. We have no consistency. We have no domestic vision or domestic thought for ideas, for policy. Our policies are all made externally. We just sign. We don't really have a policy. And our policies are band-aid policy. Whenever crisis occurs, we put in a band-aid here. And our policies are mercantilist. I'll come to that, how they're mercantilist. This is another chart that is germane to today, and this should worry us. The orange line, the lowest line is Pakistan. Everybody is up on top, and you can see where China is. This is investment, in case you haven't read the title. Investment in China is being north of 35%, 40, 45%. Pakistan is sitting at 15%. This is what this webinar is all about. 15%. We might as well go home. There is no investment taking place in this country. 15% is replacement investment. And Harun, the Board of Investment came up in 1997. Since then, the investment rate has actually been going down, not going up. So your first question that you might answer when you speak is, why don't we get rid of the Board of Investment? We've got 5 of them in every province as well as, and yet investment rate is going down. What more? Do we need a performance evaluation, or is that evaluation done? Now here, we have no shortage of policies, Mr. Chua. We have no shortage of policies. Every few days, we get tax holidays, we get EPZs, we get incentives, we get protection, we get FDI. We've got all these policies floating around. I don't know what the hell they are. They don't add up. That nobody looks at them. I call them chasing ghosts. Somebody comes up, somebody wants to make an announcement, he announces a policy, but really there is no policy. So don't get fooled by this. There is no investment policy at all. We'll come to that. We are always worried about FDI. Yet FDI is nothing. All our prime ministers, presidents, everybody is running after FDI, FDI. FDI is not even, at best it's been 3%, but normally it's less than 1% of GDP. Why are we running after FDI? What does FDI bring to the table? Even Chinese, I was just looking at the figures, Chinese FDI has never topped more than 3% of GDP. So, I mean, even China is not led by FDI. Mr. Chua, you will please address this. China is not led by FDI. The 35 or 40% investment in China is not FDI. It's domestic investment. 37 or 38% of its domestic investment. Every country is run by domestic investment, yet we are the only country that chases foreign investment, right? We chase foreign investments. India and China are also allowing their companies to invest overseas. We don't allow it. We don't make our own policy, therefore. We have a mercantilist FDI policy. Bring money in, we won't invest outside. This is mercantilism. Please bring money in, we won't send it out. I don't think you can grow your companies without them investing overseas. So we have to liberalize the overseas investment thing too. I put that to you. My second question should be liberalize. This is the most important point. Why would anyone come to a party where the hosts are sleeping? If there's no investment at home, why the hell would somebody come here? I mean, Al-Masta, if there's no investment at home, why would anybody come here? I mean, there's a Chinese, I think Japanese investor once asked a prime minister in one of these meetings that they hold for investors. Mr. President, I asked my Pakistani friend invest, he no invest. Why do I invest then? I think that's a very important point to worry about. So, you know, we've got this problem. We at PID held 2 or 3 seminars, many seminars, for example. But one or two seminars I'd like to point out. We held a seminar with businesses, we held a seminar with retail, we held a seminar with construction agencies, etc. All investors. And this was what they said. Businesses don't grow in Pakistan. Retail is primitive. Stock market doesn't work. Stabilization doesn't work. Construction activity is not allowed. We have no retail or construction activity in Pakistan. Retail chains are absent. Department stores are not allowed. We merely want to make exports without allowing domestic commerce at all. This is a point that PID has been making for the last 15 years. How can you grow exports without domestic commerce? That is what was known as mercantilism, and that is what Adam Smith wrote against. When we asked these people, they said this thing: no thoughtful policy. We have a reactive policy. We are overregulated. We are confused, erratic, and predatory taxation. We got a confused, erratic taxation system is the biggest bane of a country. It's amazing how bad our taxation system is. It's going back to Robin Hood. It's going back to King Arthur or something. It's the most primitive taxation system in the world. We've got a legal and judicial system that's very bad too. We've got costly, intrusive, and unnecessary documentation. We've got a huge footprint to the government. But then also we found out another thing. All the businessmen were also willing to self-criticize. They have a Seth culture. They don't have a culture of holding talent, professionalism in their companies. We're a talent-repellent company. Our education standards are very bad. Our employment is bad. Our quality is bad. And our Seth culture, our management culture is terrible. How do you invest in a country where there's no management culture? So these are important questions. This cartoon, I'm going to hold at every webinar now. IMF, but it could be donors, it could be others, the foreigners running the country, our policymakers chasing loans. They don't even see the mountains and the things in front of them. This is Pakistan right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, my question to the panel. Why don't we value domestic investment? What is the investment necessary for domestic investment? Should we kill domestic investment, only go for foreign investment? Should we only have a mercantilist approach? Forget the local guys, they shouldn't invest, they should just simply be laborers and not make any money, let the foreigners come in. What about the local investment? There should be no local investment, there are no chain stores, there's no local hotel, there's no local business at all. Now, what about human capital? Do we have the human capital to make investment happen? So this is the backdrop of why we thought this conference was, this webinar was very necessary. Now I'll invite Haroon Sharif to take the lead. And, it's his idea to start the webinar. Please, Haroon, with your thoughts.
Thank you very much, first of all, for setting the stage and actually saying all the things which I was also supposed to say. So I think people have already. Sorry. Secondly, I must give full marks to Pied and Dr. Nadimul Haq for generating such regular debates, which are becoming, I'm just told from my friend from Qatar, that they are even becoming popular in Qatar. So you are going in a direction. Thank you. So I think we should open up a channel soon. But anyway, coming back to, I will make a brief presentation, but just to start, if we could go to the first slide. But I would like to answer the first question here. The countries who have attracted higher levels of investment to GDP ratios, which you showed on the slide in the range of 30% or so, the two traits are very critical. One is that they have a very clear, good policy, policies to support that. They keep those policies consistent, but they also look after the existing investors who are already in your country. So they are your best, rather than only attracting new, we need to look after the people who are doing business in this country. If they are not really growing, so that they are our best, ambassadors. So the both sides are really, really critical, and that partly answers your question about that. Why are we running after, FDI? I think a balance needs to be struck, and I will go in more details in a while. So anyway, take a look at, this chart, which is basically an addition to what Dr. Nadimul Haq showed. Overall growth is declining. So our investment, this green bar down there is foreign direct investment. And the rest is domestic gross fixed capital formation, which includes The major chunk is the state investment in infrastructure in the rest of it. So it all together about $45 billion, which is about 15% of our GDP, which is actually nothing if we need to invest in our growth, which can actually take care of the labor market, the youth which is coming to the labor market. So that's the argument. And that's a consistent trend which I'm seeing, so I don't need to go into many years. So Pakistan, like our exports, we are struggling on savings and investment rate at the same level. Next slide, please. So if we look at it, the countries which have grown, in terms of investment. So if you can see India on the left, I deliberately don't compare with China, but Turkey, Malaysia, and Pakistan, and Bangladesh are somewhere on the lower side. So in our peer countries, if we need to reposition ourselves for emerging Asia, this is, I think, the issue, as the title of the seminar says, that investment crisis. So we need to look at it. So I'll go through quickly a few slides and then I'll come into my key points. Next slide, please. Very clearly, we are seeing that this whole blue pie, that over the years, China's investment has grown many-fold in Pakistan, and other countries are a small fraction of the pie at the moment. Next slide, please. These are the three historically, larger FDI inflows in Pakistan, where, as you can see, from 2013, China's red bar started growing and others actually started declining. And now we see, China again increasing, although the overall volume is not that much, but that shows that our traditional partners are not investing in Pakistan. It is if you look at the last right side, it is China and Hong Kong both. So basically the money is coming from the East. Next slide, please. And these are the sectors. If you look at the sectors, so it's power sector, some financial business, and oil and gas. That covers almost 70% of the investment in Pakistan. So that is where I will stop for the moment. For the slides, I'll come back to slides in a while because I need to explain that. And I would like to answer the question that why Board of Investment should not be closed. As our honorable host has started, he loves to close down things, but somehow ended up did not closing down things. But anyways, so what happens is that, now thinking about it, I think there are three issues I will come up front. Prime Minister Imran Khan, when he took over and when I joined, I think two messages he gave very clearly, and I'm grateful to him that he gave those messages. First message was that making money legitimately was a good thing. So it was in his speech, very first speech, and he continued to reinforce that. Second thing was, I had, now let me confess, the word I had given to him was that he needs to say that we need to improve investment climate. Somehow that investment climate thing in the speech writers and others got changed to ease of doing business. So the Prime Minister picked up the theme that he was very committed to do ease of doing business. And that is a very important, distinction I will try to make upfront. That when we look at the pie, overall pie of countries, the things which matter to attract investment, ease of doing business is a very small portion of that. So partly Mr. Almas Haider is also responsible because he started advocating a lot on ease of doing business. But I think what actually Prime Minister wanted to say was that I need to improve the overall investment climate. But somehow ease of doing business got picked. A, it was relatively easier things, technology could help. B, our donors love it, and I'll come to it in a minute. So they basically, along with our bureaucrats, started inculcating the mind that ease of doing business is the magic bullet. And since we are talking on that, during my tenure, Pakistan, showed the highest level increase in ease of doing business. And I told the Prime Minister that we are looking good because there are 28 points we have gained this year. However, this will not bring investment. And frankly speaking, in one of my last meetings, that made several people very unhappy when I basically said that in a policy vacuum, we do not have overall growth policy. We do not have a policy for exports, priority sectors, or an industrial policy. So what should I tell then, investors, that this is the policy, this is our priority? Unless and until we have that, things will not really, move ahead, because now we have excited people, but now people are looking at very clear policy guidelines. Second point is that Pakistan has unfortunately failed to demonstrate one big, investment transaction in the past several years. All big investment transactions, be it local or foreign, particularly foreign, they either, went into disputes, or the policy got changed, or something else happened. And, we have examples right from Recordec to Carcade, others, lots of Chinese investments, tariffs change, policy change, in the Bahawalpur, this solar power park, Turkish walked away because the tariff they had agreed, Pakistan changed it. Some of the very interesting things, when I was there, companies will come to me that we are coming to this economic zone. We were told that, we are tax-free and we can import equipment and plant and machinery. But now suddenly they are told that, by the way, in plant and machinery, this machine which deals with fire, this machine which deals with transport, this cannot be exempted. So there are so many hiccups in the policy. So my first point, that unless you keep the investors happy and they have confidence, and I think the investor confidence historically started breaking down in 70s when we nationalized, actually, without taking people into confidence. So after that, Pakistan never took off in terms of that. And the second straw was that if you look at lots of industrialization, big industry in Pakistan, it is at the time when we had the cheaper long-term financing available from these development financing institutions. So that's the time people opted for that. And there were lots of cronyism, state patronage at that time, but some investment did occur at that point in time. So three things to close this first part of my presentation: that we need to have a policy framework clear, which is done based on evidence and research. We need to ensure that our institutions adhere to that framework and this policy is sustained. And this policy will only be sustained if it is owned by most of the players, otherwise it will continue to change. But the biggest thing is dispute resolution. It's not only dispute linked to FBR, it is disputes, all kind of disputes, which just linger on and on and on. So this is the background, and now I'll quickly go into what happened in the past 2 years. So when Prime Minister took over, so we had 5 trips to Asian countries, China, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Malaysia, and we invited them to invest in Pakistan. As a return, and I will then pass it on to my friend from Qatar to comment on that, but we got actually firm commitments to the tune of $20 to $30 billion over the next 3 years from Gulf countries. And China obviously had, a number in mind under CPEC. So that was what I say is that the Prime Minister managed to open doors and gave a message that Pakistan was open for business, but our institutions which had to follow up, and that's where Board of Investment comes in, we were not ready to do business. Neither private sector nor public sector. Now, private sector, mostly family owned, they were keen to sell off their enterprises at good price, but they were not keen to partner with any international fund manager or sovereign wealth fund or other investors. Now, foreign investors look for partnerships. So Nadeem, to answer your first question, there is a reluctance basically to open up books to any partnership to grow in Pakistan in private space. And that reluctance basically. Now in the public space, the bureaucracy, they were incapable, I'm using some harsh terms, but the investments have not been made that how to do commercial transaction in the modern time. B, this so-called fear of accountability coupled with that. So all those investments, that's where I made a proposition to the economic management and Prime Minister that to our priority investments, can we insulate those from the regular bureaucracies and make a space which is basically authorized to get the transactions done. You need transaction management expertise. And that is where the resistance from bureaucracy, resistance from the nominees of power brokers in the government started rising, because they were just not prepared to let go for multiple reasons. And this is where the investors started getting, itchy, because they had dealt with the ministries before and they thought this will not go. As a matter of fact, I will not name, one head of state told the Prime Minister in my presence that I am putting this money, but if you don't set up a corporate-like setup, this money will not materialize, because we know the history. So that's something we need to reflect very carefully, that an opportunity we have lost in the past year and a half with very serious commitments, but our failure to prioritize it and have the expertise and human resource which can structure these goods. So that is the second part of my presentation, and then I'll come to the last one. So what I'm trying to say is that at this point in time, Board of Investment is only a facilitator. It could function as, the one-stop shop if it is part of Prime Minister's office, if Prime Minister's office owns it, and its basically law is implemented in the real spirit. What happens is that very quickly, and I would say the naivety of our, politicians, the independent things like Planning Commission or Board of Investment or regulatory agencies, they get captured in the regular government structure, and they make it, some kind of a wing of Ministry of Commerce, or they make it something else. So what happens is, and then all the bureaucrats are appointed there. So in that case, I 100% agree with Nadimul Haq that you don't need new structures if you are going to have the same people running the shop. When I took over Board of Investment, 3 secretaries got changed in my 1 year, federal secretaries. Majority of my staff was seconded from Federal Board of Revenue. Now, people, investors, basically, I wouldn't use the word dread, but basically they don't want to talk to Federal Board of Revenue. But then when you put the people who don't speak the language of investors, it's very hard for that institution to function. And I kept on pushing it that, it could get, its space, and clients also saw, but it got captured by both bureaucracy and some, political power brokers, particularly from the Ministry of Commerce, who had to protect, I must say, lots of people. Otherwise, they feel threatened from new investments. So that's the political economy of Board of Investment. I hope some of the journalists are listening to this seminar. I would like to make a statement on ease of doing business. The 28 points which we have gained, honestly speaking, A, I used technology. B, I kept the World Bank consultants out of my office for 1 year. I actually engaged with the real businessmen like Almas and in Karachi and others and took feedback. If I had gone to the same thing where the consultants just write report in their rooms without knowing anything, we could not have ever shown 28 points. And the moment I left, I saw the same consultant sitting in each meeting and taking, credit for that. So I worry for Pakistan in that sense very seriously. Now coming back to, by the way, World Bank is not bad. I'm not saying in the bad sense, but the way it is structured there, I have been talking to people like Shanta Devarajan, who is the head of Ease of Doing Business, a very well-known economist. And we agreed that, we need to promote the investment climate. But here, the investment, the incentive structure of the local offices and is such that they only pick up easy things which they can show in the press. Now the last part, I will come to it. A very brief comment, if you could go to the next slide. When we spoke to China, we agreed on, next slide, please. So this is something I want to show, which Dr. Naimul Haq mentioned, that this is the perception of investors. So the top 4 things which countries have to deal with. Number 1, the tax regimes need to be transparent and proper taxation. Corruption matters. Access to finance, we really don't have long-term finance. And then how taxes are implemented and inefficient government bureaucracy. That is investment climate in general, which is totally different from ease of doing business. So this is where the government basically, which is led by bureaucracy, was not willing to listen. Whatever I did, I used to name and shame people that, this is the time, numbers of days WAPTA connection takes and others. And obviously people don't like naming and shaming in front of the Prime Minister, but we need to be honest. So that's the difference between where the direction of government is and where it should be. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is a little, thing that the country risk where Pakistan, let's go to the next slide. Please go to next slide. Now, very quickly, I would say that Pakistan has had 7 notified specialized economic zones. We agreed with China for 9 more. I agreed with China being the lead that let's make only 5, 1 in each province and 1 in Islamabad. We don't have the capacity. But I'm told that when I left, there were 7 more industrial estates in Punjab got upgraded to economic zone. So I don't know what's happening. Next slide, please. The point I'm trying to make here is that we only have 5,000 acres of land. Out of that, still in the 7, we had 28.8% remaining, which people had not bought. But the next 2 slides are critical. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, this one. We could only provide, if you look at electricity, the 7 economic zones to only 10%. So there is no power supply available in the existing ones, and we keep on opening the new ones. Next slide. Same is the case on gas utility. Next slide. This is the scene that where we are giving utilities to economic zones. The blue is where we have provided. Now, the policy thing which I was taking up with the government was that if we are not managing the 7 which we already have, how can we make the new ones? So please make it. And the structural flaws are, which again in the beginning it was said, that there is a disconnect between federal policies, federal institution and provinces. The incentive of provinces is to make economic zone and sell plots, whereas the federation wanted to take it forward for some economic goals. I think if we give it to the private sector, like the Sundar estate, they can function much better with captive power and everything, unless and until we understand. But this is the slide which tells us the story that if we can't give utilities, how can we actually attract investment in these economic zones? So last 2 points. I'm done with my slides. With this storyline, what we need to look at is, as moving ahead, we need to have very strong, Asia focus, particularly China focus, but we need to put a value proposition on table. And Nadimul Haq and I basically pitched it that we can help the government to partner with the Chinese, institute to come up with that value proposition, which was welcomed verbally, but still it hasn't moved. So I hope that after the COVID pandemic, the government, gives it, because China is very seriously looking at when companies come here and in their zones, neither you have power, nor you have gas, nor you have land actually left. So basically, where would the investment come from? We speak of relocation, but we need to identify our sectors of, comparative advantage. Now, 3-4 suggestions to move ahead. First of all, I think we need to work on a policy for growth with priority sectors and incentives. And my proposition to PIDE is what I saw in the UK is that they write a white paper, which does not have to come from the government necessarily, because government, as you said, it's living day by day in a reactive mode, but they authorize a group of people to write a white paper to debate about. So maybe we can look at some kind of a white paper on growth sectors and growth policy, and bring it in debate in a track 2 session where other political forces and come at least start talking about it. At this point in time, there is nothing recent which we can do. I know that there's an old growth framework, but we need to put something on table. Second part is that we need to work on financial sector reforms. Unless and until there is a sporting financial sector, it's very difficult for investors to come in. And I will close that we need one big transaction to focus on. All the businessmen, people don't trust us. Let me be very open. All the businessmen who complain that the things don't happen would love to go and meet the Prime Minister, and they would know that that's not the place where actually things will be resolved. My question is that businessmen should be demanding that take 3 top transactions and put a team which can do. People will start believing. It could be privatization, it could be new investment, it could be a sector domestically. But pick one thing. We do not have the capability to do, all set of reforms. This is my headline message, that pick up one thing and show to the world that we can do it. Be it with Qatar, be it with the local investor. So that is something which is extremely, extremely critical at this point in time to take forward. So that's where I would close. Just wanted to set the stage. And frankly speaking, unless and until institutions like Board of Investment are empowered and put the right human resource, you can save a lot of money by closing these down. And going back to the old government system, which is already capturing the whole thing. So that's my takes, and we'll take questions later on. I understand my Chinese colleague has to leave at 1. So perhaps, Nadeem, you can.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Harun. Thank you very much. I'll take your point on the white paper. I think that's a very good idea. We will definitely talk to you about it. We will do something about it. I'll turn to Mr. Wang Ziuha. Mr. Wang Ziuha, thank you very much. Let me ask you very simply 2-3 quick questions. One is, please tell us, China is a champion of investment. You have maintained 40% investment for the last 30 years. How? What can we learn from you? Secondly, what is your experience in Pakistan? Be frank, please. You are our friend. We take a lot of pride in our friendship. And so we'll be welcome to give us a frank assessment. What should we do to get our investment up? Mr. Wang Ziuha, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Nadeem. And first of all, I would give the special thanks to Mr. Harun Sharif, because when he was the chairman of the BOI, he did lots of the work and made lots of efforts to, in ease of doing business, not just for Chinese company, but for all foreign investors, and also very closely engagement and collaboration with the Chinese embassy. So thank you so much. Regarding today's topic, I think it's, first of all, I totally agree with Dr. Nadeem just said, and because the economic development will mainly rely on their domestic investment. It's also our experience and of China in the past 40 years. But however, I think it's FDI is also play very important role because from their Chinese experience, in particular in the export sector, the FDI not just bring capital, but will also create a spillover effect. That means FDI will bring the international market and will bring technology and also the skill, know-how, and to training Chinese workers and let more Chinese to manager to do their work and to develop a Chinese industry. So that's very important. But I think for their Pakistani investment, so maybe I can speak a little more on their FDI, because for the domestic investment, I'm not an expert on this sector. Regarding the FDI for the Pakistan, I think firstly, Pakistan is a country of the full huge potential and opportunities for the foreign investors. In particular, in the past several years, the Pakistani government has made efforts in ease of doing business, just introduced by their Mr. Harun Sharif. So the World Bank has increased the business climate index for Pakistan dramatically in the past few years. So this made achieved the remarkable remarkable achievement in this sector. And basically speaking, Pakistan is full of the it's a huge domestic market, and it's a good geographic location with a good connection and access to Central Asia, Middle East, and the other region of the world. And also there's a huge amount of the younger people and with the good educated and good skilled. So that's all the advantages and the good potential for Pakistan to attract more FDI from the world. I think even now under the current situation, Pakistan is hit hardest by the pandemic. But from the perspective of FDI, we still witness the big increase compared to the last year. In the first 10 months of this financial year, there are more than 30% increase compared to the same period of the last year. So I think we are confident about Pakistani will keep its momentum in attracting FDI from the world. This is first. Secondly, is about the China. China remains their largest investor for the past 6 consecutive years. Because we are the broadly friendship and or partnership. So they're in particular under the framework of CPEC. So more and more Chinese company invest here. So far, we have more than 400 Chinese company located here, including their joint venture and the sole proprietorship and branch company or representative office and all types of the Chinese company here. And so their investment have covered all sectors. I mean, the primary sector, secondary sector, and the tertiary sector, from agriculture, from the steel, textile, and the automobile to the e-commerce. So that's our collaboration in the industrial sector has strengthened in the recent years under the framework of CPEC. Now is, I think, the industrial cooperation has become the one of the priority for both governments to promote the CPEC development, because CPEC has entered into a new stage. So industrial cooperation has become the one priority for them. So even after the pandemic, I think the healthcare and other sectors could be included and one more. So that's, I think, that regarding the FDI. Thirdly is about Chinese investment here, but we also have some concerns from the Chinese companies, just mentioned by Mr. Harun in detail. I think from my understanding, there are 3 issues related. The first is about the land issue, because the Chinese, they cannot buy or rent suitable lands, in particular in their bigger cities, Lahore, Karachi. That's a big issue for them. Second is their access to their connectivity, the power, the gas, or something like that, because it takes longer time for them to get through. The third is their facilitation issue. That means their including efficiency of the bureaucracy, it's implementation of the tax break policy or incentive policy. So that's they face the issue so far. But in the future, we think that both the governments will step up and to encourage more Chinese investment here. And we really hope, and the Pakistani government will do a lot more to improve its business climate. And so that's because now it's the world, in particular the developing countries, are competing for FDI. So it's if we compare the Pakistani, their SEZ policy or some of their incentive policies with the neighboring countries, even the Bangladesh, even some of the Central Asian countries. So it's not so preferential for investors. So I think there's some their space to improve for their Pakistani governments, but also for their Chinese company, they needed to do more to collaborate with the local private sector and with the third parties and to set up SEZ or to develop their manufacturing base here. So that's it's a brief point regarding the first question raised by Dr. Nadim. The second issue is regarding their some suggestion or experience here. Because I have worked in Pakistan for 5 years, so so I made lots of the Pakistani friends and know a little more about the Pakistani situation and their. But the first point is that we are Army brother, we are real friends, and the Chinese government and the Chinese people and the world to do whatever we can and to support Pakistani government. For example, during this COVID-19 and the control and the prevention of this pandemic, and the Chinese government and Chinese company did a lot to support Pakistani government. And the second is regarding their FDI issue. I think it's we can continue our information sharing and experience sharing, and we can invite more Pakistani businessmen or the official to visit China and to hold some seminar, just like today's webinar or something like that. And we can learn each other and to encourage more Chinese company enter into Chinese Pakistani market and to invest more here. So thank you. That's just my very brief point to share with everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. I know since you're leaving early, can I direct a question at you? I know you have to leave early. Can you please tell us briefly, how is it that Chinese investment became 40% of GDP? What were the key ingredients? This was even before FDI came in. So what are the key policy changes, the key things that happened that Chinese investment grew so rapidly?
Yes, and especially in their maybe in the initial 20 years stage when China adopted the opening up and reforming policies, and so their investment rate is very high. It's the highest is more than 45%, but now it's as lower. It's lower below 20%. But I think it's a very natural trend for the economic development. If we discuss something behind this trend, I think it's the first reason is led by their Chinese government. When China decided to put economic development as our priority, so government have designed a 5-year plan, and so they formulate and the priority sector to development. For example, to external sector in the export-oriented industry, from their combined with the Chinese advantage in the labor incentive or their some sectors. The second is to adopt the very incentive policies, let the business, let the private sector, and to invest by themselves, and also including very preferential financial policies. People are very easy to get financing, to get lending, and to develop their industries. So if you visit China, in particular along the coastal line of the China and the eastern parts of the China. Lots of their small business, SMEs, they developed very rapidly. And so I think that's accounted for larger their share of the domestic investment in China. So if we the summing up, I think it's led by the central government and also the provincial government. So they put the investment as the main means to promote the economic development. And then the second is to adopt the very incentive policies to promote investment for the government, for the public sector, for the private sector.
What about the role of what role did the export processing zones play in investment in China? Does most of the investment take place in export processing zones, or is there a lot of investment outside the zones too?
Mm-hmm. For this zone, I think it's in China. There are some it's a successful story, but there are other. It's a failure story, not successful. Most of their successful story took place in their eastern parts of the China, along their coastal area. It's easier to get access, and it's a lower cost, and but for their western parts, it's not successful even so far. So that's but for their successful their industrial ruin or SEZs in eastern parts of the China, I think the one important their reason we can say is they competing with each other. For example, one SEZ in their Shanghai and the other in Zhejiang province, they compete each other. If you give them one more preferential policy, I will promise to foreign investor, even the domestic investor, I give you more. I can grant more. I can let you enjoy, more policies. So that's to compete with each other. Then the promoting the development together. So it's even some of the scholar after their studies, they said that they're competing, the inter-provincial competing. It's the main driving force for the Chinese the economic development.
Last question, we hear about China's very successful export policy, and yes, of course, it's visible in your reserves. But what about the domestic market? What role has domestic market played in the investment climate of China?
Mm-hmm. Now I think Chinese is in their transition period. So our policy has a shift from their export-oriented concentration to their domestic market concentration. So now it's still in the process. But I think it's some of their policy taken by the central and the provincial government is that we want to create one market for all there to delete or to remove some of their barriers among the provinces. So there are some of their methods adopted by some investigation agency or some of their supervision agency, and to check, make it even for their level playing fields or something like that. The second, I think is this is also a natural, it's very natural because with their the improvement of the well-being of the ordinary people, and they will more focus on domestic their market. And the third is also the incentive policy is very important. So there have some to encourage the Chinese company to put more focus on domestic market, not just for international market. So okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kawang. Let me turn to Mr. Almas Haider now. Almas Sahab, you are both an investor as well now in the policy circles. You are the chairman of the executive of MD of the Executive and Engineering Development Board. Almas, tell me, why is there no investment in Pakistan? Why you investors don't invest here?
Sir, let me narrate a small incident. I invited the Chinese ambassador to the Lahore Chamber of Commerce, and I asked him this question that your investors are going all around the world, especially at that time they were investing in India, they were investing in Southeast Asia, and they were going into Europe and other countries. I said, I don't see many investors coming here, although you are helping us in developing the infrastructure, but I don't see private sector investors coming here. He said two things. He said, number one, Mr. Haider, where is the land where my investors can come and invest in? And number two, he said that in your country, the tax rates are highest in the region. So why should they come to Pakistan and invest over here? So every time I bring somebody to Pakistan, I can't provide him land and I can't provide him an energy connection. And so he goes back. So after that, we started doing some research in Lahore and found some very amazing things. The first thing we found out was that there were only 1,200 plots which are legit industrial plots, which is 400 plots in Kotlakpur Industrial Estate and 800 in Sundar Industrial Estate. Every other plant project is located either in a residential area or is using agricultural land, which means the land use policies of the government have still not catered for zoning for any industrial land. And this is not just Lahore, this is all around Pakistan. So anybody who sets up any company or factory anywhere in Pakistan normally is an illegal factory because they're using land which is either supposed to be zoned for residence or for agriculture. That's number one. Number two, we have about 62,000 factories in and around Lahore, which is small, micro, cottage, medium, and large industries in Lahore. A very rough estimate, 62,000 of them are over there. Only 1,200 of them are on legit land, which means that everybody else is now waiting for LDA or somebody to send them a notice, which will say that you have to commercialize your place, and commercialization means you have to pay 20% of the commercial value of that land as tax to the government before it can be, because the land, before the land use can be changed. And that actually means, and one of the reasons why we're not very welcoming to outsiders or investors in our company is that the moment they start doing due diligence, they'll find out these legal things, and then these legal things, everything will stop over there. So one of the reasons is that's one of the reasons why we do not welcome foreign investors, because then we'll get stuck with all the legal issues that come in once you start getting your land regularized. Those who have tried to get their land regularized from these agencies know the amount of pain and suffering that they have to go through. It is not a simple payment of tax. It is way more than that. And there's a lot of corruption involved, and there's a lot of other things involved. So I agree with my Chinese ambassador who came to me at that time. He visited Lahore Chamber 3 or 4 times and I was there. And this was one of the constant discussions that we had over there with him. So, sir, that is one of the reasons why people don't invest in land. The second is that, unfortunately, and somebody was commenting here, I was just reading those comments also, that ever since the 1970s, Bhutto Saab brought in a mindset which has been adopted by the bureaucracy, which means that they are looking after the micro and small enterprises, and they want everybody to be small and micro. The moment they start growing, they start getting problems. And these are not just tax problems, these are growth pains. And the government is probably one of the biggest reason why that is happening. Uh, Let me extend myself a little bit beyond the question that Nadeem Saab asked me. Uh, and I must confess that it was my mistake in 2015 to have focused on ease of doing business index at that time. The reason I think it was a mistake is because the whole government at that time, well, we were publishing an article a day on ease of doing business, trying to educate the government why this is so important and the government should adopt it. So the Nawaz Sharif government and Shahbaz Sharif government adopted it, and then the next government also used the same vocabulary that was used in 2015 by Lahore Chamber of Commerce. The reason is that the ease of doing business is basically for optics. It does not give you any in-depth support for becoming competitive in an environment. The real index that I thought that we should have focused on was the Global Competitiveness Index. And if even today we start working on it and start looking at it seriously, probably the 12 pillars of competitiveness that we are very bad on. And if I can just pull out how bad we are in, just let me see if I can. No. Okay, we are a little better than Gabon, and we are better than Sierra Leone, and we are better than Yemen, and we are better than probably a few other countries. We are absolutely terrible when it comes to competitiveness. And the reason why we are bad on competitiveness is because of our factors of production. We are bad on individual factors of our production. When you come to land, as I said, there's no zoning. We don't know where to put up a plant or a shop or whatever we want to do. We are terrible on HR. The training that we have started giving to our schools is that if you flunk 40% of the times or in 40% subjects, you still be passed, so that we can show that we have lots of graduates and a lot of people who have done their 10 years and 12 years and 14 years of education. When you start asking them questions, they have no clue of what they studied when they were in their school, college, or university. Capital, obviously, the third factor of production is capital. The government takes everything away, and the banks don't need to give it to anybody in the private sector. So, and they make more money by giving it to the government than actually putting in any effort to give it to the private sector. And the fourth is entrepreneurship. Fortunately, most of our economy is not documented. So whatever I hear from so many learned people, learned economists, are the numbers that are available to them. They make deductions from the numbers that are available to them. What about the numbers that are not available to them? What about the investment that goes in every shop and factory which is not recorded? So is it included in the 15% or is it more than 15%? So basically these numbers are also, um, they have to be double checked, and because we don't have any legitimate source of information for our informal sector. So again, and the informal sector doesn't grow because the moment they start growing, they have to become documented, and they try to avoid documentation. And the documentation uh, is very painful. Anybody who gets documented, ask him the number of pains that he goes through every day when he goes to the office or to his shop. So I'll stop here for a minute and then I'll respond to other questions that come up.
Thank you, Almas Saab. Thank you, Almas Saab. Barni Saab, can I bring you in now? I think, quite frankly, the informal sector, Barni Saab, is where our entrepreneurship lies. The formal sector is not entrepreneurial at all. Basically, most of them are around government offices seeking support. The informal sector is where entrepreneurship and where all the employment is. And unfortunately, Barni Saab, tell me, you are sitting in Qatar. What is this documentation nonsense? The World Bank has put us first on EDP, ease of doing business, second on documentation. Now you don't know how much documentation there is here, Bunny sir. I have to show my ID card, which is an authenticated, technologically superb identification system. I have to get it attested 10 times a day to do anything. I have to hand out my ID card everywhere so that it's now in everybody's pocket, so that anybody can defraud me. As identity theft is very easy. This documentation that we are in, what can we do? Anisab, go ahead. Please tell us about Qatar and about Pakistan, what you know. You know, of course, you obviously know Pakistan, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Nadeem Saab. First of all, I just wanted to thank you for organizing these webinars. I think you should watch your back because you're giving some of the anchors in Pakistan quite a run for their money. The one thing I'm particularly very glad to hear is that there is room for intelligent conversation on screens in Pakistan, and not just intelligent, perhaps it's also intelligible conversation on screens in Pakistan as well. Now, talking about ease of doing business surveys, one thing which struck me as remarkable is that, I'm lucky that, I for 10 years, I've been in a country that provides me sufficient resources to anyway, so what I was saying is that, just because you pass, advanced microeconomics in an exam doesn't guarantee that, you'll ever be able to do any real practical economic research as well. I mean, the ease of doing business survey pretty much works the same way. So the very fact that you have a high rating on ease of doing business survey does not actually mean that when people do real business in your country, it guarantees that there will in fact be any ease of doing business in the country in terms of doing work. Now, some observations I just wanted to make before I wanted to present our case study. I mean, we've been working in Qatar on addressing some similar issues. And what we have done in this space, and I just wanted to present that. But before that, I just wanted to say that, our experience in Pakistan, so the QFC, helps in facilitating both inwards and outwards investments. In Pakistan, there was some very, very positive, encouraging discussions at the start of, the recent government's tenure in terms of investments. There was a package that was devised for Pakistan. Of that, unfortunately, to date, I believe what's been capitalized is only the balance of payment support element. Obviously, there was a big interest in capitalizing that. The rest of the investments, or a more strategic relationship over there, has pretty much not been capitalized on at all. Now, this could be, a number of reasons why you would say that. I don't think it's just a simple issue of bureaucracy and lack of education. I mean, there could be political factors involved over there as well. One thing I found particularly interesting is that it's often investments once they're expressed an interest in, they become labeled strategic. And once an investment is labeled strategic, it pretty much means that your timeline in terms of time to transaction has been dramatically thrown out the window. Another very interesting aspect that I've noticed in terms of Pakistan is that Pakistan is quite a hard institutional sell in terms of institutional investor. And I remember that, in one of the previous webinars, the issue was raised that, you have to decide who your constituency is. So is the constituent, if FDI in Pakistan is the 3% is the mark that, where everyone's going at, is your constituency really then your domestic investor and also, your overseas Pakistanis? Because I myself am also I'm an investor in Pakistan as well. I do have an investment over there, and I made that investment just purely on the basis that I have a link to Pakistan. I mean, I don't have to be sold the Pakistan angle as much as perhaps a foreign investor. And I think the increased focus on overseas Pakistanis, has to be there. to actually capitalize them to make investments in Pakistan, and perhaps that should also increase investment in Pakistan. That then leads me to the question as to whether a brand can be created for investors to be part of, which allow them, a easier path to actually achieving successful investments in Pakistan. For that, I'd like to tell you the story of what happened in Qatar, because often many people find this story quite interesting, in the sense that, Qatar was quite a small place not too long ago. In the last 10 years, there's been some remarkable progress made in Qatar on the issue of both ease of doing business, international businesses being present here. And the approach that Qatar took to that is by establishing an onshore financial center. So if I can just, present a quick case study on point. So the Qatar Financial Center is a onshore financial center. It was only established in 2005. It targets both inwards and outwards investments, and and it offers an English common law based environment. So why that is important is, from an investor's perspective, they often look at the point of what environment, what sort of certainty of dispute resolution would they have. And as we know in Pakistan, from the Tetian, the Ricotech investment, the agility, and the pro-gas investment issues, that disputes often become quite material in the Pakistan. And there is a model which is often adopted in that regard, which is the obsolescing bargain model, which says that at the start of the investment, investor has the highest negotiating power to negotiate terms. But as the life of the investment progresses, the investor's power declines, and the hosting country's government's power in that respect significantly increases. I think in Pakistan, it's a very interesting case study for POIT that they might wish to do some research on, is to how much time does it take for the bargain to obsolesce in the Pakistan environment. I think that time would probably be quite short, from my guess. Now, one very interesting aspect of that is that, in terms of courts, now we had to make it easier for people to resolve their disputes. And so we have our own independent courts. So there's the state courts, which are the Arabic law courts, and then there is English law based courts in Qatar. And one, I suppose, memory that some people might have of that is that, the cricketing trial of Muhammad Asif and Muhammad Amir was conducted at our courts as well. And our courts, Lord Wolf, who was the former Chief Justice of England and Wales, at that time used to be the Chief Justice of the QFC courts. Another very interesting aspect of this model is that there is no fixed geographical boundary for this. So there is multiple buildings and locations in Qatar which can be designated to be part of this special economic zone. And this special economic zone is basically a parallel track of law that you can choose to be part of, as opposed to the old law. Now, what essentially are we saying here is that basically, if there is inherent inefficiencies in the environment, and there is inherent inefficiencies in the government and bureaucracy, it is often very hard to cure those. And it takes a very long time to undertake institutional reforms. For example, Ishrat Saab is undertaking institutional reforms in Pakistan. That has to be a very long, prolonged process. But what can be done in the interim? I mean, perhaps an overlay can be built on the existing bureaucracy, where this overlay institution becomes the interaction between the investors and the underlying machinery, and it therefore makes it easy to do business. So, for example, going back to the question that you asked me, Nadeem Saab, as to whether you should get attestation of your ID card, we actually don't ask for attestation of documents, because if they've been attested by an organization, while in the state you will need to get them certified. Like, you know, if you go through the Qatar Financial Center, then, you know, the attestation, etc., is no longer required. And we ensure that, you know, once these documents are arranged and provided to us, there is no need for repeat provision of these documents. So we attract business professional services firms, financial services firms, and you know, non-profit organizations as well. Now, very important on why we particularly target business and professional services firms, because they are in fact channel partners which bring in transactions and financial FDI. So law firms and accounting firms are often the first port of call for international investors to go to actually make an investment. And if we encourage a lot of these international firms to come and establish presence in Qatar or in our financial center, they then become the mode of encouraging transactions to come here. Because they are incentivized. Look, you know, their partners who actually make revenue on the ground are encouraged to convince their clients to come and invest in a particular country. Just by way of a case study, there was essentially 2 international law firms in Qatar. And before the advent of the Qatar Financial Center, now there is 24. There was one international accounting firm in Qatar before the advent of the QFC. Now the entire Big Four suite of international accounting firms and the second-tier accounting firms are all present here. So that's about targeting the channels which encourage the transactions to come over. Now, very interestingly, when the law for the QFC was passed, it actually specifically states that, you know, the QFC is established to act in accordance with international best practice and to eliminate bureaucracy to the maximum extent possible. Now, I would question as to whether a law will see the light of day if it mentions that it is being done to eliminate bureaucracy to the maximum extent possible in Pakistan. So that also shows that, you know, from the very top, from the people who are passing the law, there was a clear dedication and commitment to ensure that there is, you know, a commitment to elimination of bureaucracy and red tape. Now, one thing that we do is that this experience is not for everyone. So we pre-vet people who get the benefit of the VIP treatment that you get once you're part of our financial center. So we ensure that there is match, and once you're, you know, there is that pre-vetting arrangement done, it ensures that, you know, the investment experience is much quicker for the potential investor to actually do. And then there is an aftercare for investors as well. So once you actually come and set up shop, you know, for example, for immigration, you do not have to go to the state authorities and undertake the usual checks, etc. We have our own immigration arrangement where, you know, you submit documents online and we take care of immigration needs. And for those who've experienced that, like, you know, that is, you know, we get very remarkable, you know, feedback on it. In terms of the structure of this financial center, you know, we have a legal and tax environment. So as I said, this environment is actually based, so the law in the state of Qatar is based in Arabic, but we have a parallel, you know, English common law based environment in Qatar. The Minister of Finance is the chairman of the financial center. We have a financial regulator because we have the usual suite of international foreign banks and investment banks. One very interesting comment that was made recently, you know, by one of the other presenters in your webinar was that there is a lack of non-banking financial institutions focused on investment in Pakistan. Now, we could not have resolved this overnight. So how we did this is to attract some of the international name players to come and establish shop here. And again, it goes back to that channel partner arrangement that once these people are there, it is their job to encourage investment. It is their job to actually encourage transactions. And once they're on ground, they do a lot of your hard work as well. now, dispute resolution is key because for all these people coming in, they need some certainty that tomorrow they will not be dragged through ICSID arbitrations, and there is some local reliable dispute resolution available to them. So in Qatar, because the availability of resources that we have, whenever the Chief Justice of England and Wales, when he retires, he becomes the Chief Justice of the QFC court. So currently Lord Thomas is the Chief Justice of the QFC courts, and we have Sir David Keane, who looks after any regulatory decisions that people feel affronted by. So they do not like their tax assessment, or they do not like some decisions that the government or the authorities are taking against them, they can actually appeal that to a separate body over here. Now, very important in this regard is that there is onshoring and there is offshoring. So we are an onshore financial center. That means that you can actually go and sell your services or conduct your activities throughout the state of Qatar as well. These courts are a court of the state of Qatar. So their judgments are recognized automatically in the state of Qatar. Now, this is a pretty big sovereignty challenge, because in Pakistan, you can well imagine that it would not be welcome that judges, though they be of international repute, come to Pakistan and actually sit in courts and then start making decisions in Pakistan, which are recognized the same way as a decision of any other court. But that said, I mean, there is very, very experienced and extremely well-versed judges, some of them in Pakistan, who can deal with these commercial matters. And perhaps there is room to have at least an independent arbitration body, perhaps set under the auspices of one of the government bodies, BOI, or be it one of the other ones, that can actually resolve these disputes and has some credibility in the eyes of investors. This will certainly be a factor which will encourage people to come here. So another thing is, of course, foreign ownership. I mean, we allow 100% foreign ownership. We allow 100% repatriation of profits, and there's no withholding tax. People can trade in multiple currencies. Now, this might be a bit of a bigger issue, given the FATF complications in Pakistan, but that adds to the value proposition. And, we have simpler, visa processes and requirements. So just a bit on onshoring and offshoring. So many of the financial centers that you see around the region currently are offshore financial centers. So what offshore financial centers are essentially, often things that, become tax havens by labeling. Because in Pakistan, if you look at the overall value proposition of Pakistan, access to the market in Pakistan, because it's a populous market, is a very attractive factor to attract investors to Pakistan. It's not just about export as well. Then, should that be the idea, what you have to do is give these people who come and invest in Pakistan access to the local market as well. Now, this in itself is a two-edged sword, because what it does is it encourages competition amongst the local stakeholders. And often, from our perspective, that is a very, very tight political line to maneuver, because you find that significant people who control the local market become quite averse to international investors coming in and participating. So maybe the idea in that regard could be that, where international investors are allowed to come into Pakistan, they could partner with key existing players, and that might reduce the onshore tension in future, should that be the model that's over there. We rate fairly highly in terms of transparency and efficiency of legal framework internationally. One interesting aspect that I've noticed is that, in any of the surveys that you pick up about Pakistan, corruption again and again appears right up there in terms of the factors that have to be considered about, the investment climate in Pakistan. From my experience, Pakistan is one of those interesting countries where, your accountant advises you that they have included an administrative charge in your incorporation, even for the purposes of going and registering to pay sales tax. So to go and register to pay tax, sometimes, your accountants have to engage in certain practices to facilitate that. Now, a broad double tax treaty arrangement is very, very important because one of the issues that was raised in the presentations is that Pakistan not only has a complex tax structure, the tax rate is actually quite high. So we have a 10% flat onshore taxation on locally sourced profit. Now, and we have our own taxation authority, so you don't have to go and deal with the traditional tax department that has its own legacy problems. Our fresh clean skin tax department deals with our investors and helps, and they then ensure that those are in aligned with the state's taxation department practices as well. So that's again an overlay for making tax a little bit more simpler for investors to come in as well. The kind of services, we have banking, asset management, insurance, reinsurance. Now, these have come in waves. So first, we targeted a lot of channel partners who actually bring in the transactions. Then we've built structures and facilitated models which actually allow people to actually undertake the investment and conduct their businesses in that regard. As I was saying, these channel partners and, people who are facilitated or whose job it is to actually encourage transactions are very important for ensuring that sufficient transactions are encouraged and brought to Pakistan. We have a very, very simple incorporation process. That is that, you come and have a chat to us and we determine whether you're suitable. So one of the entities that has been, recently brought to us because of Qatar 2022, the World Cup. The World Cup in Qatar will, the entire infrastructure for the World Cup will be hosted in the QFC, the funding structure and the local organizing committee. So from that perspective, one of the core benefits that, for example, partnering with some of the areas in Pakistan offered for us is to partner with Sialkot Incorporated, which is, the Sialkot Chamber of Commerce. So Sialkot Chamber of Commerce has been very, very supportive and have actually established in the Qatar Financial Center as well. And that is a particular area where we think that, Pakistan, for example, can bring a lot of value to Qatar. So from that point of view, we've encouraged them to come and establish with us. That's pretty much what I had to say for now. And again, I said it is not my position here to actually dictate, what should be done in Pakistan. But it was just a case study that of a relatively new country that came from without the the history that Pakistan has, and decided that they were going to encourage investment and open up the economy. And this was their take on when you cannot solve the inherent problems in your system and the bureaucracy and the other issues that are over there, you build an overlay over that system to ensure that at least you create a premium branding for investors who come in and make their life easy in terms and their experience of investing in a country easier. That's what I had to say for now, Nadeem Saab.
Thank you, Bani Saab. Thank you very much. On your take on the judges, let me also tell you that we have some very good judges in this country. In fact, we have surplus of them. So if you like, please, you can take some of our judges too, instead of English judges only. But that's besides the point. I think there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a wonderful summary. On balance, we all agree that government is extremely complicated. We all agree that the government is the problem here. The tax policy is a problem here. We all agree that the cumbersome regulations are a problem. We all agree that, for example, land is a huge issue. Our cities are not open for investment, something that, again, PID has been saying for the last 20 years. We've been arguing for this. But then, Almas Saab, the problem is the chambers only want land for themselves, not for anybody else. So I think we all have to come to a consensus here that land is required for every activity, not just industry. When you make industrial estates and they make housing colonies, then the rest of the market is gone. So we have to be very clear that land has to be allocated on a market basis and not on a basis of where people get allocated land and then make shopping plazas later on. I mean, that, or make housing colonies later on. So that has to go too. So I think a lot of things that need to be discussed and taken care of. But my question remains.
Come here for a second.
And my question remains, sir. We'll come to you. We'll come to you later. Don't worry. We'll come to you. So the question still remains. Domestic investment in this country is virtually non-existent. If you take out the public investment, domestic investment is less than 9% or something, which is absolutely a joke, which is probably not even maintenance investment. But before I go back to the panel, I'd like to take some questions from the audience, then we'll go back to the panel. The questions, we take a few questions, then I'll come back to the panel and you can answer them. Anybody wants to speak, please raise your hand or just tell me. Musaddiq Malik, Senator Malik. Senator Saab, boliye.
I think this has been very interesting. And I'm reminded of Saudi Arabia, where the Sagia hired Monitor to get on the map of competitiveness and ease of doing business. And in about 2 years, they were the 12th easiest country to do business, and with only one caveat that no one could enter Saudi Arabia and actually get the business done. So there were these indices, whether they're competitiveness index or ease of doing business, you know, some of them were initiated by Michael Porter, and Monitor at that point was Michael Porter's company, and they knew exactly what to do with those surveys and where to send them and how to get the responses and how to go up the ladder. So I think the proof is always in the pudding. I found this webinar very interesting, and a bunch of questions were raised. I mean, I think some questions, Harun raised some questions about NAB and instability of policy and the courts interfering. I think you mentioned courts interfering. And then, as you know, there have been some campaigns where for political reasons, we've discredited in investments as well as investors, in certain cases, even countries. And then I think some very interesting questions were raised by Almasa, where he spoke about the factor input costs and people and capital availability of financing. And at the end, I think Ishaq Saab gave a very good view. Dubai has followed that, and Sagia also to some extent, and I think they're also doing a good job. But other than you know, these onshore centers, I haven't found any solutions. I mean, I've heard all of these different talks, and they've raised issues. Could the panel help us with the solutions? I mean, what are the solutions? I have a very, coming from the political angle as well as from the strategy angle, I think we live in suspicion of each other. And therefore, any investment that is made at any point in time is suspicious. And therefore, continuity is not a possibility. What do we do about this suspicion? How do we, all the institutions and courts and NAB and instability of policy and discrediting investments as well as countries investing, this all comes from sincere suspicion of each other. So my larger question is, any solutions? And then my specific question is, what do we do with this suspicion thing?
Good point. Good point.
Let me come in. I want to respond to Nadeem Saab's comment also.
Almasa, let's get the floor. फिर आपके पास वापस आएंगे. Then we'll come back.
Okay.
Anybody from the floor? Anybody? Looks like nobody is ready to ask a question. Okay, you seem to have floored them. So very good, Ji. Let's go through this. Almasa, go ahead.
Achha ji, let me start with the fact that physically, Islamabad is 11 kilometers away from Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
So, Pindi ke upar Pakistan khatam ho jata hai, and then there's another island of excellence, which is called Islamabad, which is just outside it. And there is a huge disconnect between what is happening in reality and what is happening there. Even आपके जो comment हैं and many other comments that I hear, वो supply side के comment होते हैं कि let us do this and then everybody else would automatically conform to what you have done. While there's a whole world out there, which is 220 million people out there, who are living their life every day from morning till night and doing things. वो रेडी भी लगा रहे हैं और वो दुकान भी खोल रहे हैं और वो रिक्शा भी चला रहे हैं. They're doing many other things, and their life is impacted because Islamabad or the provincial centers think that the life has to go in a certain way. The problem is that if I am living in Lahore and I have 100,000 rupees or 50 or a little more than that, and I want to set up a small factory or a unit, I won't go to M4 or I won't go to Faisalabad or I won't go to somewhere else because the government has decided कि वहाँ पे हम एक free zone बनाएंगे या industrial area बनाएंगे. Why would anybody and everybody from all over Pakistan flock to one city or one industrial estate जो कि government ने बना दिया है? Why can't we have this opportunity around every city? और अभी जो आपने बात की कि लाहौर चेंबर वाले और ये चेंबर वाले इस तरह करते हैं, चेंबर व्हाट चेंबर इज ट्राइंग टू डू एंड व्हाट आई वाज ट्राइंग टू डू व्हेन आई वाज द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ द चेंबर वाज we wanted land all around Lahore which could be zoned for commercial purposes. There is absolutely zero land available in and around Lahore and other cities. I am talking of Lahore because I live in Lahore and I was the president of this chamber, but I can talk the same thing about every other chamber of Pakistan. There is absolutely, and this is the job of the government. अगर मैं ये कहूँ कि मैं I will set up a housing colony somewhere. You know, it is so easy to set up a housing colony. It is so easy to start an import and export business in Pakistan. In fact, import business is easier to do than export business in Pakistan. All the rules and regulations that have been created for people जिसको आपने उस वक्त मर्केंटाइल के कभी शायद लफ्ज इस्तेमाल किया था. It is for a trade. It is not for creating jobs. It is not for giving jobs. It is not. Electricity is not provided to areas जहाँ पे jobs create हो रहे हैं. The rate of electricity is the highest in Pakistan when it comes to industrial areas, for example, or commercial areas. Why do we do that? And if Islamabad is unable to understand that, then this is going to continue. मतलब जो मुसद्दक साहब कह रहे हैं कि I don't see any solution or I don't hear anything good, it is because this side of Islamabad, we live our life with whatever is available to us. We are not creating the future of Pakistan. The future of Pakistan is being created somewhere else. I stop here.
Manzoor Sahab, do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. Can you hear me? Yeah, my question is more to Arun Sharif Saab. You know, I can see the role of, because he has been there. I wanted to hear it first, and I can see BOI facilitating foreign investors. Somebody comes, they look after him, etc. But do the government agencies, which normally have to give permissions, whether it's commerce or industries, or do they really care about BOI? I think they think it's a superfluous body. That's my impression.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Harun Sahib, do you want to address it? Or Zubair Faisal Abbasi? Just one second, let's get a question. Zubair Faisal Abbasi. Then Iftikhar, go ahead, Zubair Sahib.
Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to ask a question to Harun Sahib, basically. My question is that during his tenure and a person who is expert in investment management or investment handling, what 3 or 4 most important binding constraints which he wants to remove in Pakistan if we really want to be a sort of attracting investment friendly country? 3 or 4 real binding constraints which he would like to remove. Thank you very much.
Iftikhar Sahib, do you want to say anything? Iftikhar Sahib.
Thank you, sir. I have a question to Mr. Harun Sharif Saab, and then I have a comment to Ishaq Saab. Harun Sharif Saab, जब आप head कर रहे थे, so what was the reason that you couldn't establish any SEZ, which is a brainchild of the federal government, at the center or even at Karachi? Because these were in the domain of the federal government. तो अब क्यों नहीं बना सके? दूसरा उसी का एक है SEZ के बजाय ये कि हम upfront we are charging the investors, a resource starved economy है, उसमें हम millions of rupees लेते हैं from the investor just to buy the plot, and they buy it, they just keep it a safe investment, and after 10 years when the resources and the facilities will be there, they will sell it later on. Maybe Almas साहब को ये बात अच्छी ना लगे, लेकिन real estate चल रहा होता है उसमें. So why not to give them the plot, you make them utilize their money for investment for production, and later on you can charge them. And my comment for Ishaq Saab is that he was talking about judiciary, but there it seems that judiciary is the part of the solution. In Pakistan, judiciary is the part of the problem. So there is a fundamental problem here.
Okay, Ali Kamal, then Alia Khan, and that's the last question. Bas. Ali Kamal.
Assalamu alaikum, ji. Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, I have a comment and a question maybe it can turn into. I'm pro informal activity, and if some industry sector is untaxed and exempted, जिसे हम कहते हैं मादर पिदर आजाद हो जाए, then people started investing in that sector. For example, purchasing files in the real estate sector, which is a non-productive sector, or wo sirf price escalate karta hai. So that is one of the problems which we can, I can see that people are not investing in the main investment in the main productive sectors. Secondly, sir, as we have already always discussed that in Pakistan the economics is totally about the revenues, how to increase revenues, how to put taxes on that, how to have the regulations. So whenever we have the regulation or taxes on a smaller value chain, they open the offshore company outside in Dubai or somewhere else where they may not be able to pay taxes. So these are two issues which we are facing. So how can we get rid of that? Thank you.
Okay, Alia.
Ji, my question is about the Rashakai Special Economic Zone that was about to be launched just before COVID hit Pakistan. I mean, linking the slide that Mr. Harun Sharif showed about the availability of utilities, electricity and gas to the SEZs, how was it that the Rashakai zone was being launched when it was not being sourced with power or gas? Secondly, I'm a bit puzzled about the impression that I got from our Chinese guest today. It appeared as if the obstacles that and impediments that we are all identifying and talking about are not as real for them, I mean China, as they are for other possible investors. Maybe I'm wrong, but I did not see a very large concern on the part of the representative of the Chinese government to not make inroads in Pakistan as far as coming and investing is concerned. I would like your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, Harun, can you please respond?
Very quickly.
Especially, please tell me why we should keep BOI. I think, quite frankly, BOI should be.
Go
ahead.
I'm coming to that. Again, first of all, Musaddiq raised a very important point, which I also said. Okay, does the country, have the people and policies that inspire confidence? इस वक्त अगर इन्वेस्टर आता है तो उसको कॉन्फिडेंस कैसे दिया जा सकता है? My solution, Musaddiq has asked for solutions. My solution is do one good transaction which you can showcase, just to prove कि आप काम कर सकते हैं. इस वक्त जो सूरत हाल ये है कि हर ट्रांजैक्शन में इतनी ज्यादा सस्पिशन से ज्यादा इनकॉम्पिटेंस है. When there is an incompetence, you start looking at things very suspiciously. क्योंकि आपको उसकी समझ नहीं होती. I wouldn't comment on judiciary and others, like a general understanding of how business is done in the modern life. बहुत सालों से हम उससे बहुत दूर चले गए. तो my solution मुसद्दक would be कि एक तो ये है कि transactions एक दो करके दिखाएं और उनको sustain करके दिखाएं. No matter how small these are, so that people start getting confidence कि पाकिस्तान में कारोबार हो सकता है. ये जो बिग बैंग रिफॉर्म्स हैं उसके लिए मैं लिख भी चुका हूँ, काम भी कर रहा हूँ, खुद भी देखा है. I don't think country is ready for that, although many people would say otherwise. But when you're not ready, start small, but show to the world that you are serious about it. So that's my only solution at this point in time. The questions have been raised about BOI. Let me now count that how many people are in charge of investment, right from the Prime Minister's office. We have Mr. Ali Jahangir Siddiqui, जो उसके ambassador हैं. हमारे एक साहब ब्रेडफोर्ड में इन्वेस्टमेंट के ऑनररी इन्वेस्टर हैं. फिर यहाँ पर हमारे जो अभी सफीर हैं in the United Nations, Munir, he also one day came with a letter that I'm the investment ambassador. Then the gentleman who owns Centaurus Mall, he one day came and he was designated as, chairman of Punjab Investment Board. Then there are 8 ministers just to please. So there are too many cooks trying to do things. So I think Pakistan needs to make up its mind. Are you serious? And you want to give lead to one? If not, I 100% agree that you don't need basically BOI, because BOI and Planning Commission and these were actually made that, you put a professional there, there's a team that reports to the Prime Minister. When you make it in control of the too many players, folks, why should investor come to BOI? So I'm 100% sure that in this environment, BOI will not function. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not there. जहां तक इसकी बाकी 2 सवालात हैं, very quickly on binding constraints. देखिए, binding constraints मैंने पहले भी raise किए हैं. They're very simple. Almas has also raised that there are no incentives, long-term incentives for investment. For instance, it's over-regulated. Property rights kamzor hain. There is no financial sector support available, and skills and competency. You don't get good people to run, these capital investments. So these are the binding constraints which any economy will have to deal with. But the question here is that why economic zones? I have sympathy with Almas because economic zones की जो ज़मीन है वो ज़्यादातर political grounds पे दी जाती है. इस शहर में लगा दो या जहाँ लगा दो. These should be actually connected to the markets where investor feels comfortable. But economic zone में at least the idea is that you can overcome some of these burdens. कि आप उसके अंदर regulation भी दे दें, SEC भी बिठा दें, FBR भी बिठा दें, उसके अंदर ही उसका custom भी हो जाए. लेकिन हमने उसको एक जो है वन स्टॉप शॉप नहीं चला पाए. आलिया ने कहा रशिया कहीं में कैसे देंगे. देखिए, SEZs ना बनना, SEZs बनाना which are not functional is very easy. मैंने अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन में बताया कि 7 जो existing है वही काम नहीं कर रहे. 1-2 के अलावा ना बिजली है, ना पानी है, ना गैस है, ना वहां पे लोगों को मिलता है. So basically tax incentive alone does not attract serious investors. So SEZ ना बनने की वजह mainly ये है कि it is very fragmented structure और आधी चीजें फेडरेशन के हाथ में है, आधी सूबे के हाथ में है. मैंने SEZs पूरी दुनिया में देखे हैं, वो जहां जहां काम करते हैं वहां पे टोटल सपोर्ट दी जाती है. इवन इन बांग्लादेश हसीना वाजद खुद सपोर्ट देती है, किसी की मजाल नहीं है कि वो उसको ना काम करके दिखाए. So ये इतना fragmented, too many players. In fact, as a matter of fact, somehow मुझे तो लगता है government promotes this policy that you give same authority to multiple players and start seeing that who does what. उससे we create further confusions. जहां तक आलिया का सवाल है on रशाकई is one of the zones जो हर province में बनना था. उन्होंने somehow जमीन acquire कर ली, इसलिए बन गया. I can assure you कि इसमें अभी ये पूरी facilities देते बहुत time लगेगा. It's only a signboard there at the moment. It's not that investor जो इफ्तिताह होता है वो ये होता है कि आपने एक agreement कर लिया that we will make it. आप देखिए कायदेज़म अपैरल पार्क है मोटरवे के ऊपर, उस पे दीवार बनी हुई है. But basically there's only land available. So at this point in time we need to reflect very seriously कि आप एक transaction करके तो दिखाएं बजाय इसके कि हम नए से नए फीते काटी जाएं. जहां तक चाइना का ताल्लुक है, there is no special incentives to China कि चाइना के जो जहां तक I don't need to defend him, but diplomats and they are very careful in talking informally. They raise all the barriers which we have discussed. Chinese are facing the same barriers actually, and that's why we don't see other than infrastructure very huge investment. तो मेरी राय इसके इन सवालों के जवाब में ये है that please अपने आप की reality देखिए कि हमारी capability, do we have the capability to conduct few good transactions and sustain it and tell the world be local or not. Stock market पे आप देख लीजिए when was the new issue which came to raise capital for investment. People are just not investing. There are easy ways of making money, तो वो क्यों ना करेंगे. तो ये general इसका my response.
Thank you. बर्नी साहब बताइए, ये जो जमीन का खेल है हमारे मुल्क में कि हर कोई ऐसी चीज चाहता है, ये चाहता है, कतर में तो जमीन ही कोई नहीं, और उन्होंने जो खेल खेला है वो जमीन वाला नहीं है, वो फाइनेंशियल सेंटर वाला है। जो मेरा दोस्त पॉल रोमर पिछले साल का नोबेल प्राइज विनर, वो यही कहता है कि भाई ये सारी गेम रूल्स की है, लॉज की है, ये गेम जमीन की नहीं है, हम लोग जमीन के हेर फेर में पड़ जाते हैं। क्या ख्याल है आपका, बताइए बर्नी साहब।
Sir, very valid observation from your point. Just before I go to that question, I just wanted to address that point that, Harun Saab made in terms of point of contact for investors. So, unfortunately, our experience, I cannot go into the details of this particular transaction, but in this transaction, basically, our point contact changed 3 times during the transaction, and also the relevant departments which were dealing with the particular transaction as well. So from the point of view of having a single point of contact and particularly a person who has institutional knowledge, who you can talk the same language, who understands you as to what, when you talk about particular indices and ratios, what are you talking about? So, I'm, without pushing any agendas, I mean, jab Harun Saab hote the, and, maybe some other people were also there as well. That conversation was much easier to have with Pakistan. I think this is now becoming increasingly difficult, a conversation to have with Pakistan. On your observation and Paul Romer's, research into the benefit of rules over, Zameen ki game. But the very reason why Qatar actually decided not to do the offshore financial center is because they didn't want to become another real estate play. And you're right, it was not really a game that could have been played very well here as well. From that point of view, the choice that we did, and as Musaddiq Saab also observed as well, this overlay that we have, it is actually not geographically bound. So you have the rules and regulations, and then you are capable of designating existing real estate and existing places in different areas that should you choose to operate from those areas, you have the ability of relying these beneficial laws and regulations. So it's really a choice of law. It's not about am I in Rashakai or am I in this place? It's quite agnostic about that. It's saying, wherever your business makes sense, please go there. But this is the beneficial set of rules and regulations which will give you some competitive advantage or ease of doing your work in this country. So that's what I had on that. On the issue of judiciary, one person made an observation that, I would tend to disagree a little bit, because I do know some of the judiciary in Pakistan, and there is some remarkable talent in Pakistan judiciary as well. It's just a matter of having the right people with the right competence in the right place to hear and determine particular disputes, which gives investors comfort. Pakistan, like any other country, I mean, there's Indonesia and there's many other countries where it is almost impossible to argue proper case, yet they still happen to take a lot of investment in their countries. But Pakistan, I believe, particularly because of our common law upbringing and teaching in the area of English common law, which is usually the law that is used in most international transactions, has actually got a fair bit of talent. Now, in terms of attitude, that's something that's totally different. I think perhaps the person's observation more related to the attitude of the judiciary rather than competence or ability to actually deal with disputes.
Fair point. Thank you. Musaddiq Malik, you have the last word. Go ahead.
Thank you. मैं ज़रा हारून साहब की बात को आगे बढ़ाना चाहता था. हारून साहब, there have been lots of transactions. ये पिछले 4-5-6 साल के अंदर बिजली की बड़ी ट्रांजैक्शंस हुई हैं, $2 बिलियन की ट्रांजैक्शंस थी. गैस रीगैसिफिकेशन टर्मिनल्स की ट्रांजैक्शंस हुई हैं, हाईवेज मोटरवेज की ट्रांजैक्शंस हुई हैं. प्राइवेट सेक्टर में बिजली के अलावा कदरे कम ट्रांजैक्शंस हैं. लेकिन जो सस्पिशन का मैंने आपको पहले बताया था, वो बड़ी एक अजीबोगरीब सिचुएशन हमारे लिए क्रिएट हो गई है. हम इस हुकूमत की हर चीज़ को डिस्क्रेडिट करेंगे जब हम आएंगे, इन्वेस्टिगेशंस खोलेंगे, कभी नैब को ले आएंगे, कभी मुल्कों के ऊपर उंगली. अब ये कतर के ऊपर, कतर एक्चुअली हैड टू take a very strong stance for our government to back off. Similarly, चाइना के ऊपर हमने एक पूरी कैंपेन चला दी कि जी वो हमारी लड़कियां ले गए हैं, और पता नहीं क्या क्या हम यहाँ पे चलाते रहे अजीबोगरीब कैंपेन्स के जी सारा हमारे पाकिस्तान की प्रॉब्लम्स ही चाइनीज इन्वेस्टमेंट्स की वजह से आ रही हैं. और होगी इसमें कोई ट्रूथ, आई डोंट नो, मगर हर चीज़ को हम इसी नुक्ता नज़र से देखते हैं. अगर हम जुडिशरी को देख रहे हैं, तो कार के देख लें। आई मीन आई एग्री विद इसाक साहब, हमारे अपने भी कुछ कॉलेज के बड़े ब्राइटेस्ट माइंड्स आर राइट नाउ इन सुपीरियर कोर्ट्स, लेकिन जब आप जजमेंट्स को देखते हैं तो आपको कार के नज़र आ जाती है, फिर रिकॉर्डिक नज़र आ जाती है। अभी कल हमने कोविड के ऊपर सारे पाकिस्तान के खोल दिए हैं, ये मॉल्स खोल दिए हैं कि कोई बात नहीं, कुछ नहीं होता, पाकिस्तान में ये एपिडेमिक है ही नहीं, पाकिस्तानी बायोलॉजी वर्क्स डिफरेंटली देन द रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड। आपको याद होगा एक इन्वेस्टर को फ्रांस से आए हुए थे, तो अस्पताल में घुस गए थे हम देखने के लिए कि इधर फीस कितनी हम अस्पतालों में ले रहे हैं। सो ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स आर देयर। सो ये कुछ एक ओवरले है, एक बड़ा डार्क सा क्लाउड है। इस क्लाउड के अंदर लोकल इन्वेस्टर भी, यानी मैं खुद भी यहाँ पे काम करना चाहता हूँ। मैं तो खैर पॉलिटिकली एक्सपोज हूँ, मेरे लिए पाकिस्तान में काम करना वैसे भी मुश्किल है, लेकिन अगर मैं नहीं भी होता तो मैं 1000 दफ़ा सोचता तो सही कि पता नहीं नदीमुल हक साहब ही ना सेमिनार मेरे खिलाफ करवा दें अगली जब गवर्नमेंट तब्दील हो। तो और उनको यकीन होगा इस बात का कि मैं ज़रूर चोरी कर रहा हूँ, अगर मैं बाहर से आया हूँ, पैसे लेकर आया हूँ, तो मैं तो इतने बिलियन बना रहा हूँ और दुनिया में किस जगह पे मुझे 25% मिलेगा। अभी हमने चीनी के ऊपर इन्वेस्टिगेशन शुरू की हुई है, अभी हमने IPPs के ऊपर जो गवर्नमेंट के कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स हैं इन्वेस्टिगेशन शुरू की हुई है, आटे के ऊपर भी कोई इन्वेस्टिगेशन है। ये नहीं मैं कह रहा कि सिर्फ ये हुकूमत कर रही है, मैं आपको ये कह रहा हूँ लार्जर पॉइंट जो मैं कह रहा हूँ कि हम ये सस्पिशन को कैसे ख़त्म करें। और प्रॉबली द आंसर इज़ जो नदीम साहब ने कहा था कि अगर आप रूल बेस्ड गेम बनानी शुरू करेंगे रादर देन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, सिर्फ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर या सिर्फ ज़मीन के बुनियाद के ऊपर, तो प्रॉबली स्टेबिलिटी रूल के अंदर थोड़ी सी ज़्यादा होती, लेकिन हम तो रूल को भी खैर बदल देते। इस पे अगर आप कुछ कमेंट दें कि हम क्या 3-4 चीज़ें करें, एंड आई एम विलिंग, मैं बड़ा सिंसियरली पूछ रहा हूँ ताकि मैं इसको चैम्पियन कर सकूँ लेजिस्लेटिव फ्रंट के ऊपर, कि हमें क्या 3-4 चीज़ें करनी चाहिए जिससे ये सस्पिशन हमारा थोड़ा सा कम हो, मिटिगेट हो, ख़त्म तो नहीं हो सकता। और ये ना लगे कि हमको करप्शन जो है उसको प्रमोट कर रहे हैं, यानी करप्शन को भी हमने रोकना है, साइमल्टेनियसली हमने कॉन्फिडेंस भी बहाल करना है। तो ये कैसे बैलेंस क्रिएट होगा, अगर इफ एनीवन कैन कमेंट।
देखिए, इस पे एक बड़ा क्विक कमेंट है मुसद्दिक, ये आपकी बात दुरुस्त है, लेकिन मैं इसको अगेन दो चीजों से लिंक करता हूँ कि वन इज इनकॉम्पिटेंस टू अंडरस्टैंड इश्यूज। ये हर इदारे के अंदर मैंने नोटिस किया है कि उनको समझ ही नहीं है, आई वुडंट नेम एट द हाईएस्ट लेवल। दूसरा ये है कि ये जो चीजें इन्वेस्टर्स होती है ना, उनको अगर देखें, कैपिटल यू नो इज द मोस्ट कावर्ड थिंग इन द वर्ल्ड। अब मैं आपको विदाउट नेमिंग वन ऑफ द वेरी फर्स्ट हाईएस्ट लेवल मीटिंग्स जिस वक्त हमने एंग्री के टर्मिनल को पब्लिकली खोलना शुरू किया, सो आई बेसिकली सेड कि क्या ये बातचीत बिहाइंड द डोर्स क्वाइटली नहीं हो सकती? अगर आपका ख्याल है वो ज्यादा पैसे बना रहे हैं तो उनकी एग्रीमेंट को उनको निगोशिएट कर दें। बट एट दिस पॉइंट इन टाइम वो जो हमारा एक मीडिया का और सोशल मीडिया का, एवरीबडी वांटेड टू गो पब्लिक टू स्कोर ए पॉइंट कि हमने एक बहुत बड़ा स्कैम पकड़ लिया ना। सो देयर इज अ पॉलिटिकल पॉपुलिज्म व्हिच इज बीइंग प्रमोटेड कि जनाब हमने एक हुकूमत आती है वो दूसरी हुकूमत का करती है। यही चाइना के साथ हुआ, आते ही एक दो इंटरव्यूज दे दिए गए, देयर वाज नो नीड टू गो पब्लिक। सो हमें इस वक्त हाउ बिजनेस कॉन्फिडेंस नीड टू बी रिस्टोर्ड, we need a very serious dialogue and investment in training, I would say, of people कि आपने इसको कैसे डील करना है। And I can share without naming, one of the Chief Justice of Pakistan actually asked me कि टी ब्रेक में कुछ हमारे सवालात होते हैं, कैन यू ब्रिंग इन सम एक्सपर्ट्स जो हमें समझा सके कि इनका मतलब क्या है। Now unless and until people understand कि why investment is important और हमारा conduct क्या होना चाहिए, ये जो एक हॉकिश कॉन्डक्ट बन गया है, एंड आई मस्ट से कि इसके अंदर खासतौर पे पॉलिटिकल लेवल पे मीडिया का बड़ा रोल है, बिकॉज एवरीबडी वांट्स टू गो एंड ब्रेक अ स्टोरी कि मैंने ये पकड़ लिया। नाउ उसका जो डैमेज हम कर देते हैं इंटरनेशनली एंड लोकली, जैसे आपने कतर की मिसाल दी या चीन की मिसाल दी, उसको फिर रिपेयर करना बहुत टाइम लगता है। लेकिन ये तो टॉप लीडरशिप के ऊपर है और हम लोगों के ऊपर है कि ये डायलॉग शुरू करें कि भाई if the country needs to stand up, I don't think that's the way we need to go forward. अभी इस वक्त communication इस पे नहीं हो पा रही है। That's why I said insulate a transaction and show to these people कि यार ऐसे काम होता है, please don't do it. That's all I have. It's a long term process, but mindset इस वक्त incompetence based है, hawkish है, populist है, और immediately everybody wants to go to media if not to social media.
India, any other panelist? Almas Saab, you'd like to say anything? Bani Saab?
मेरा ख्याल है अगर इसको लेजिस्लेशन की साइड पे लेके जाना है तो आई थिंक वी आर ऑलरेडी ओवर लेजिस्लेटेड। हमारे पास इतने ज्यादा लेजिस्लेशन है कि उनको कम करने से फायदा होगा, उनको बढ़ाने से नुकसान हो जाएगा और ज्यादा, क्योंकि जब तक पिछले वाले नहीं आप ठीक करेंगे, आप उसके ऊपर और लोड कर देंगे ना लेजिस्लेशन. So I don't know who has the capacity to look at the previous legislation जो कि ब्रिटिश ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी ने बनवाए थे और किसी खास मकसद के लिए बनवाए थे. वो हम कब निकालेंगे, कैसे निकालेंगे, और हम कब वापस उस तरफ जाएंगे जहां हम अपनी डायरेक्शन सेट कर सकते हैं.
बड़ी अच्छी बात की आपने सर. Malma sir, very good point. Bani sir, would you like to say anything?
Sir, yes. The one approach to this is to basically ditch whatever you have, take a fresh slate, and start drawing on that, which is the approach that was taken here 10 years ago. And I was lucky enough to be a part of it from the infant stages. But in Pakistan, I mean, I think that just my observation, there is a policy for almost everything, and there is a legislation for almost everything. Yet the observance or the true observance and spirit of those policies or legislation is all often not there. So from that point of view, either there is room for a complete shock to the system, where you say, well, whatever you have, unfortunately, it was a mistake. Really sorry for the last 60, 70 years. Put it all away. Here's a slate, and then we start drawing afresh. Or you say, well, we've spent a tremendous amount of. In fact, I can almost guess that the total expense that Pakistan has undertaken in building its legislative regime is actually far, far, far greater than even some of the most well-performing economies these days in other parts of the world. So if you've already done the the expense on developing that legislation, perhaps the observance and legislation and training of that legislation to the people who actually implement it, which is the bureaucracy, could perhaps be improved, and that might perhaps lead to better outcomes.
Excellent. Thank you very much, folks. We've had another great discussion. It points all again to the same place, Mossadegh. For God's sakes, get our governance going. For God's sakes, get parliamentarians to read our laws. I don't think parliamentarians even read our laws. The problem is they pass them without reading the laws. Take this, for example, our university legislations have 4 secretaries from the federal government, 4 secretaries from the provincial government, 1 judicial nominee, 1 parliamentary nominee on every board of the university. How the hell you run a university law-regulated state? We are a deeply overtaxed state. We are a deeply over-documented state. We don't like private investment. In fact, one thing I might say about my panel, which I will inshallah review next time, all of you talked about foreign investment. And while I made a big pitch that I don't care about foreign investment only comes to rape us. It doesn't come to invest in any country. Foreign investment only takes away more than it puts in by definition. It can't come in to put more than it takes away. What about the domestic investor? When are we going to think about the domestic investor? I think, Harun, we need one big domestic transaction, not a foreign transaction. We need one big domestic company. Anyway, we'll take it up next time.